Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. I'm your host, Will Francis. Today I'm talking to Sarah Whittaker, Head of Sustainability Communications at Primark, the fashion giant. And we're going to talk to her all about how they are dealing with, but also communicating their sustainability initiatives there. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. It's great to have you.
Hi, Will. Good to be here.
Yeah, great. This is not a topic we've gone particularly deep into, to be honest. So I'm curious to hear what you've got to say about it. So you're head of communications around sustainability. You obviously work with marketing, but just to explain, when someone, just for our audience's benefit, when someone says they work in communications, how is that different to marketing?
I sit within a team called Corporate Affairs, which
Mm.
covers a whole host of press office, internal communications, colleague engagement, and kind of accessibility and charity. And then we have a specialist sustainability comms team, which is helping the business think about how they communicate around sustainability and ethics and kind of brand purpose across all different audiences, including customer, stakeholders, investors, reporting, ESG reporting,
Mm.
kind of those platter of audiences.
So it sounds like it's all the kind of channels of communication other than marketing. It's things like PR, it's things like bulletins to stakeholders. It could be internal comms, maybe. I don't know. Is it all of those things?
Yeah, all of the above. Good point. I forgot to mention colleagues there, which are a huge, a very important audience for us. We've 80,000 colleagues across Primark and growing.
Wow.
So they are a very important kind of group of advocates for us. But I think my role and my team, when it comes to the marketing kind of arm of Primark, we help advise on product marketing in sustainability. We help kind of shape the
Mm.
narrative on how we might communicate a product or a particular aspect of sustainability. For example, we have repair workshops or we have a
Yeah.
textile take back scheme. So things like that. But there is so much going on in sustainability at Primark, and not all of it's relevant for customers. So I suppose we help
Mm.
the teams think about what might be relevant for customers and what they might want to take forward, and then kind of deal with all the other quadri of audiences that we need to talk to as well.
And also, could you just describe Primark to someone who might not know the brand?
Yeah, because I know you've got a global audience. So
Yeah.
Primark was founded in Dublin, in Ireland, and it is now what we would say like an international retailer with over 470 stores and growing, and 80,000 colleagues, as I mentioned. I think the belief, Primark was founded on the belief that like looking and feeling good shouldn't cost the earth, and it's still the same.
Mm.
It's very much around affordability and bringing kind of fashion and quality and now sustainability to the masses at the high street at a really valuable and affordable price.
Yes, as a British person, I can say that it's much loved, and it's a funny place that it occupies because yes, it's very well priced. Let's just say that it's very competitively priced, but a common nickname for it is Prime Arnie, and people love to boast about how cool and fashionable something they're wearing is, but then the punchline is how much they paid for it.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, that's a really positive thing because you're so good at following trends. And so, is that an accurate representation of how it lives in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think so. Like we are hugely trend led and, have like a lot of kind of iconic products that land every season and a lot of viral products which is brilliant.
Mm.
Particularly I'm just thinking of last during Christmas we had boyfriend pajamas, and a lot of the licensed products like Stranger Things will go viral and they're brilliant. But I think like Primark is also really well known for its essentials. Like 50% of what we sell is actually essentials as well. So we've got that value proposition that sits across the whole high street, I think. From, you can come in if you're looking for something to wear on a Saturday night, if you're looking to
Yeah.
dress your family, if you're looking, we have a really brilliant home collection as well. So I think there's all and everything at Primark. I think the kind of challenge for me in my world is all about kind of proving that low prices don't mean like low standards, or someone pays along the supply chain. And
Mm.
that is kind of like, we have a really long-standing ethical trade program, and as our sustainability strategy, which we launched in 2021. And kind of me and my role and my team, and so with the support of the businesses, helping kind of communicate that and tell that story in a really positive way, and help build brand perceptions and hopefully change them as well, because we are doing a huge amount to try to change the industry or change our business in terms of kind of sustainability.
Well, that is inevitably the next thing people think when they think about the two key characteristics of the brand are it follows trends, so it's fast fashion, which makes you wonder about what we're doing with stuff that from 6 months ago, and it's also given to the consumer very cheaply, which we assume somewhere along the line, maybe someone's not getting paid very much to add value. So, how do you deal with those perceptions, I suppose, or assumptions from the public?
Yeah, it is a challenge, and it definitely is something that we face every day as a brand. I think a huge amount of what we are trying to do is show and prove that low cost, as I said, doesn't mean low quality. And actually, um, I think loving your clothes for longer can come at any cost. We did a
Mm.
big piece of research a couple of years ago, looking across the market at different products and testing them against durability. And actually, some of the highest priced jeans didn't last as long as some of the lowest priced jeans. And actually, the conclusion was really that price isn't an indicator of durability. And actually, the trick is really to try and encourage consumers to love their clothes for longer, whatever the price is. And that's really what we, at Primark, and what me and the team are trying to do, because people love clothes, and people love feeling happy people have great memories around clothes. There's an emotional attachment to clothes.
Mhm.
So I think you can get that at any value and any price. And I think that's what we're trying to do at Primark, and really show that you don't have to buy something that's really expensive just to have an emotional attachment to it.
That's interesting. I've not thought about that before. That sort of, yeah, emotional attachment to clothes, because you're definitely right about that. We do have that. They feel like part of us, and that's why they're so hard to get rid of. Even there's that whole thing: if you haven't worn it for a year, get rid of it. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's really hard to see that one through.
Or hand it
Um,
over to someone. You
yeah.
don't have to get rid of it. You can give it to someone, hand it over, give someone a new life. And I think we do it really well with kids' clothes.
Mm.
I don't know why we don't do it as well with adult clothes. And obviously, there's loads of platforms now that you can use, and Primark is on loads of those platforms as well, showing that people do see a resale value in Primark clothes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. So, thinking about all of that, you every year, or for the past 4 years, you've put out the Primark Sustainability and Ethics Progress Report, and the most recent one, I believe, came out quite recently.
Yeah, in November.
Yeah. Um, any highlights? Any kind of interesting nuggets there that are worth talking about and pulling out?
Yeah, I think for your audience, it's worth just kind of, before going into the actual kind of content, I think
Mm.
it's worth just referencing the fact that we took a new approach to communicating this report this
Mm.
year. So we created an interactive website, which
Nice.
is pretty innovative for the industry and pretty different for kind of sustainability reports more broadly. They're like, it's a voluntary report. We don't have to do it. There's lots of compliance reporting that we have to do in ESG, but this isn't one of them. And a lot of the information does feed into other compliance reports, which is helpful. But what we were finding is that like it's a massive piece of work. Like a report like this is, there's 6 months of work from the business going into this, and
Yeah, it looks it.
loads
There's
of
a lot in here.
teams
People can visit
involved.
this at SR for sustainability report, sr.primark.com, by the way.
Thank you, Will, for the plug. We might get some readers coming in after this, which would be great. But yeah, we decided to think about how we could actually, because like I think where sustainability is going is it's almost like an expectation of a big brand like us. And people are kind of thinking, oh yeah, well, they expect us to do X, Y, and Z. And but I think where we need to get better as an industry, or more broadly, is just communicating it in an effective way and in a snappy way that people can actually understand, because it's a
Mhm.
really, really complex subject in every industry, including fashion. So we've this year we just worked really hard at creating something that was kind of interactive, engaging, and people could actually kind of flick through in a very short amount of time and just learn about the different areas and topics, and then dive into more detail if they wanted to. So it was definitely a challenging project to take on as a team with the wider business, but we're
Well, it's
really
true
happy with
that
the
because
outcome.
I think with a lot of this stuff, it's a lot of it ends up in kind of white papers, doesn't it? And huge reports that feel only accessible by industry analysts, and that feels like part of the, you know, part of the act of greenwashing, because you're doing it, but you're actually keeping it away from normal people in the format. So yeah, I have to applaud that, making it in a more accessible format.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and I suppose just some of the stats, like I think we're showing, that we focus particularly from Primark. Circularity is huge, obviously, for us as a business, because of who we are as a product business, selling products and millions of products every year.
Just
Um,
define circularity for me.
oh God, you really challenged me now.
Sorry.
So circularity from a waste or or product perspective is about taking new products, or new fibers, and then using them for their kind of as long as they're kind of can be used, and then recycling them at their end of life, and then putting them back into the waste stream, and that closed loop kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it's really, really hard in the fashion industry at the moment to take waste and turn it into new products. There's a lot of innovation going on, but it is that textile to textile recycling is still kind of in early stages. You'll see lots of brands coming out with kind of press releases and details on new partnerships in this space, because it's the area that people are really investing in at the moment.
Interesting.
But yeah, so
Interesting.
going back to the report, so we have lots of details on, the fibers that we're using in this space, and kind of how we're partnering on recycled materials, as I was talking about, how we're training our teams on using new fibers and using circularity to make and design different types of clothes.
Mm.
Um and things around carbon emissions, and working with our supply chain, because that's really, really important, and driving emissions down our supply chain is really key, because what most people don't really know is that most fashion brands on the high street don't own any factories, so they contract to work with factories in sourcing markets. So technically we don't have full control over our supply chain emissions. So we need to work really closely with our suppliers
Yeah.
to kind of come up with new ways to drive down carbon or water, or and kind of develop new ways to drive efficiencies in your supply chain. So
Well, I'm curious about that. So your suppliers, I imagine that they are adapting to pressure to be more sustainable, so that, because essentially you're accountable for how they run their business in some ways, and how they treat their staff, and how they treat their environment around them wherever they are. So are the suppliers kind of responding to that pressure and upping their game in terms of sustainability?
yeah, no, so suppliers are really, really important. They are yeah, bedrock of our business. We have loads of really long-standing suppliers as well, so we would partner with them on, say, for example, this our circularity. We have a circular product standard. So
Mm.
when we launched our first collection, again, talking about circularity is taking old fibers and turning them into new, or taking new fibers and then making sure that they can be recycled at their end of life. But when we launched our circular product standard, we had to train loads of suppliers on how to use the standard and how to make the clothes and design the clothes in this way. And then at the same time, you're training kind of your staff and your colleagues on it as well, because it's a new green skill that maybe the product teams wouldn't have typically understood in the past. So now this is what we've done on circularity and durability, which is around improving the longevity of your clothes and, kind of making sure clothes can wash and wear better. We've created standards and frameworks so the teams can use them to follow and kind of make sure that the clothes kind of are made in line with those frameworks. So they're really useful documents.
Interesting. I mean, so you hinted at the fact that you don't have to, you're not legally obliged to do a lot of this stuff. Just give me a sense of how much of this you have to do and how much of it you're just voluntarily pursuing as an initiative.
So it's definitely changing. So I joined the business maybe 3.5 years ago, and we knew compliance was coming and we knew legislation was coming, and there was lots coming out of Europe. At that stage, we didn't really have full visibility of it, but I suppose this strategy was set up as a way to kind of make sure that we had the right measures and procedures in place and right ambitions in place to face into any legislation. The Green Deal came out from Europe, and it was really stringent and really there was, I think, like 200 bits of legislation that we didn't have in the past were coming at us.
Wow.
But this, I don't know, you might have seen in some of the media, but Europe has kind of gone back and pulled back on some of the legislation. And I think they were concerned that they were making businesses anti-competitive. So particularly based on, what's happening in the US as well. So we're kind of in this limbo phase at the moment where we're working towards what we think is going to happen across different legislation and adapting some of the existing commitments or evolving them and pursuing some of the more kind of aspirational things. But at the moment, it's a bit hard to know what is actually going to be kind of there and what won't be. And there is some clarity on some bits of legislation, but some are not. And I think until we have full clarity, it's kind of hard to know which exactly is aspirational and which is just compliance. But there is, I think, part of Primark and why I love working there is it's just a group of people who really want to do the right thing. And as a business, do the right thing. It's a really values-based business. And we do a lot from a communications perspective in terms of of using those values and kind of driving them back to embed different strategies in the business, including this one. So I think that kind of helps us.
I suppose what I'm trying to get a sense of is, a business like Primark. Yeah, okay, they can see legislation coming, and they want to adapt to that. But also, like every big business, they're under pressure from shareholders to make as much money as possible. So it's partly trying to get ahead of the game, but not limiting themselves financially too much. But at the same time, trying to do the right thing, and that's really nice to hear that. Coming from you, it's great. I suppose what I'm getting at is why. Like, why do all of this stuff? Do you think that the customer, is it just about legislation? Do you think the customers really care, or do they just want the cheapest clothes?
Yeah, and that is exactly, I mean, value is always number one for our customer. That goes without saying. Value is number one. People come to Primark for value. But we did ask ourselves the same question that last year. I suppose because we launched our strategy in 2021, and we went out and talked about our commitments and where we wanted to get to by 2030. And I think maybe it was too hard for customers to really understand, because they want to know what's in it for them, and they want to know,
Yeah.
what are you doing to improve my clothes that I take home, and
Mm.
why does it matter what you're doing in the supply chain around carbon emissions? Of course, there's some stakeholders and some, very kind of informed customers who are really, do
Yeah.
really want to know that, and we do need to cater for all different audiences. As I mentioned at the start. But we did do a big piece of research, and it was a lengthy piece of research, and we did lots of different avenues. We did quant, qual, we did focus groups, we did symbiotics, which I don't even fully understand, but some of your listeners might.
I don't.
We did a lot of, we had kind of people coming into stores and checking labels, and it was a really, really comprehensive piece of research across 5 markets. And we also, did a scan of social
Mm.
media and media monitoring as well. And actually, in some, like, it came back that yes, value is number one, and that is 100% correct. But actually, people do and customers do care about sustainability, and it is starting to change the way they shop, and
Mm.
but they still struggle to understand about choices when they go into a shop, and
We do.
what X means and what Y means. But when they do learn and they do find out about, particularly, we obviously were looking at Primark in this instance, but when they were looking at, when they did find out what Primark was up to, it did change their perception of the brand. So,
Mm.
I suppose I could have probably told you that before we did the research, because of my understanding of the brand and
Mm.
of sustainability. But this just really helped clarify it and helped us give an understanding how it kind of translates across different markets as well. So, yeah, so with that kind of information, I think what we're trying to do at the moment is really hone in on a couple of key areas, like clothing longevity and how to wash better and durability and
Well, they're
s-
very accessible subjects, aren't they? They are the
exactly.
immediate things that matter. I mean, that I'm the same. We're all the same. When you look at something in store, you're like, "Ah, doesn't look like it'll wash well, or doesn't like it'll last well." Whether you're paying 20 quid or 300 quid for it. So
Yes.
it's good to sort of put it in those very kind of real everyday terms.
Yeah. But it's also good to know, there is obviously this thing called the say do gap, which applies across all sustainability topics and not just in fashion,
Yes.
where you've got people who say that they want to do something but then act
Yeah.
differently. So say that they recycle but then don't recycle because it's too difficult, or they're too
Yeah.
lazy, or they don't want to. And people in this industry might say they want to shop more sustainably, but then actually they can go and, go to an ultra fast fashion brand and
Well,
buy
that's
something
true.
there.
I mean, when asked, when you ask a customer, do you care about the environment? I would say most people say yes.
Yeah.
It's that you're right. It's that difference between when asked, yes, they'll say yes. But actually, when it comes down to their browsing in store, I mean, just out of interest, so just to wrap up what you just said, that you've basically found all these different ways to hear from or ask customers what they think, and you found out that the value is number one, but they care about sustainability. Is there ever a conversation about what sustainability means? I mean, when someone says sustainability, I mean, our minds go to kind of eco topics, the planet, the environment, things like that. But for some, it includes things like, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the employer brand and your employer ethics and things like that. So, what's included in sustainability for you?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And we do flip flop between, should we be calling it sustainability? Should we
Mm.
broaden it to ESG? Which covers what you were talking as well. And we have teams that focus on the strategy of what we term as accessibility and community impact as well. And we have a strategy team around sustainability. We have a strategy team around sourcing. We have a quality team. We have and obviously all the product teams. And all of them do, we all work together really closely. And actually, you'll see in the report, we cover all those
Mm.
aspects, because all of them are really important from, I suppose, when you talk about brand purpose, each of those areas you have to be a responsible brand nowadays. You have to be doing well and showing progress and impact across all those areas. So I think sustainability for us definitely is quite product focused and kind of that circularity, managing textile waste. But from a kind of broader brand purpose perspective, we do communicate across all those areas and have teams, as I said, driving the strategies in the business.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I get that from your report. It's it clearly kind of shows, doesn't it, that there's these sort of clear areas, and one of them is, well, your role as an employer and things like that. What channels, I'm thinking back to marketing, I suppose, but in general, in marketing and communications, what channels do you think have been particularly effective in terms of communicating your sustainability efforts?
So I think when I joined the business, it's kind of mad to even think about it, but like Primark, we had we we didn't have kind of a website where you could go and check stock, and you couldn't do click and collect in the UK. And we're moving, as quite quickly into the digital space. So but stores currently are the most effective way to kind of engage customers. And I think visuals in stores in the past have allowed us to really tell some nice storytelling around sustainability, talk about our commitments. But I think also kind of linking that back to, we have QR codes on all our POS when we talk about sustainability. So if a customer
Mm.
wants to read more, they can, which I think has been really effective, because not everyone will want to. And for those who do, you can find the detail on the website. Like, you don't need to have it all front and center. I think our social channels are great as well. We have millions of followers as well, so we can really kind of tell a nice story around product in that space. But I do think as well, like last year, we spent a huge amount of time trying to build our communications approach to colleagues. Because I mentioned at the beginning, we've got 80,000 colleagues, and actually a lot of them, from some of our own internal research, showed that they didn't know what we were up to in this space in sustainability, and they didn't understand the strategy. So if your colleagues can't understand it, what does that say about your so you really need to make sure that your colleagues can speak and can, have that barbecue conversation around what you're up to in this space. And that was our main ambition. So we created a campaign last year called We're All In. And it ran for the whole year. And it's still kind of ongoing, and had really good traction, particularly in retail teams who got really behind it, and had their own sustainability weeks, and, had their own kind of
Cool.
sustainability. Some of them held swap shops and did repair workshops and things like that. And you do often get concerned when you see, greenwashing challenges against other brands, and brands being held
Mm.
to account, and people get nervous. So it's trying to build confidence in teams, and showing that you're doing the right thing, and that they still can communicate. And that's part of the reason why me and the team were created, so we could kind of get under the skin of the strategy, understand all the different subject matters, and then think about how we're going to whip this into a message to a different type of audience, because it's so complicated. You can't have someone just dipping in and out of it. But we
It's a
work.
really good point that, I mean, because just to clarify, you were talking about this is all internal, what you're talking about. And it's a really good point about where you've got you want advocates, but the subject is seen as quite risky, right? I mean, I feel that if I worked there, I would definitely think twice about starting going banging on about you know, a fashion retailer's sustainability initiative, because I'm just waiting for that snarky friend to jump in and say it's greenwashing or something like that. And so it's actually really nice to hear that you're empowering people. I would hope and imagine that you have a kind of a no blame culture, right? There, it's not like you want people to feel that they're not going to get fired for saying something slightly awful for someone accusing them of greenwashing.
Oh, yeah, but of course, yeah, and that would apply for anything. But I think we actually have a really close relationship with the legal team, and I know lots of marketeers will find some of their legal counterparts quite difficult sometimes to try and get different campaigns over the line and things like that. But legal for me are like one of the most important counterparts in the business, and we both of us as teams we follow like different changing rules and regulations on communicating sustainability, and the Competitions Market Authority published guidelines, I think it was last year, and they're kind of seen as best practice across, and they would have collaborated with different European bodies, and they're linked to the ASA and things like that, so we would follow those guidelines. And then the UN actually published a sustainability toolkit for marketeers as well, which is really comprehensive. So there is information out there, but it also it's really interesting to see kind of how much it's evolving, and if what people could have said 5 years ago wouldn't fly now. And you just really need to stay on top of things because it's changing all the time.
Well, yeah, but I suppose it's a huge it's a huge thing to ask you, I suppose. But how do you simultaneously empower your 80,000, maybe not all of those people, but a chunk of them? How do you empower them to talk about it, but at the same time keep them kind of on message?
Yeah, really good question. I think you start simple because I think what we did, and it's similar to what we're trying to do with customers at the moment, is just narrow your message and narrow your focus,
Mm,
and really hone in on a couple of key areas that would resonate with them. And I think when we look at, and we do use research quite a lot to help us inform our strategy, and when we look at some of the research that came back around colleagues, it was, from a retail perspective, it was like, tell me what you're doing to tackle packaging waste. So let's go back to them and tell them exactly what we're doing to tackle textile packaging waste, because that's what they're seeing every day in the store. But people
mm,
in head office mightn't need to know that information, and maybe colleagues in Germany might want to know that more than colleagues in the UK. So you do have to kind of adapt it, and it's you can't adapt every single message for every single store in every single market, because you never stop.
of
But
course.
you do need to really look at, yeah, go back to the research, try and get feedback from the right groups, and understand what they want to hear. And I think keeping them on the message is just keep it really simple, and talk about impact rather than kind of claims. So we always say, and this is guidance from legal, is you never talk about absolutes. So you never said, you never
Yeah.
say we're sustainable, because nobody is sustainable. It's more sustainable materials, more recycled materials. Like, this journey is never complete. So it's trying to, um, and we're really, we don't, everything that we kind of say as a business is backed up by evidence and data. So it's trying to just, encourage people to do the same. If you are going to speak about it, just look at what we might have said last year in the sustainability
Mm.
report, and use that as the basis.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're you are communicating that you're making progress, but at the same time, inherently acknowledging that Primark, like every business, hasn't solved everything yet.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's about like, and we're a growing business as well, and we're not ashamed to
Mm.
say that. I think, growth does have to go hand in hand with sustainability. And I think, across all industries. And I think, we definitely feel that, Primark has the scale to make an impact. So because of the scale of the factories that we work with and the scale of the products that we make, small changes like that we make, say on circularity, on durability,
Mm.
recycle fibers, working with different partners in that area, can have a really big impact. on the high street, so, and in the industry. So that's kind of where that's, that's what we really believe, and that's in that sense. But sorry, going back to your message, I think it is all about honesty and transparency, and being honest about the challenges that you face as well, because there might have been areas that we thought back in 2021, do you know what, that's a great idea. But now the regulation is caught up, or the technology hasn't caught up, and the business has moved to another priority, and you have to adapt. So at the moment we are actually looking at our strategy more broadly, and looking at kind of reshaping it.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. Now our time is coming to a close. We've got just a few minutes left. I would love to ask you a bit about how you got here personally, about your journey. So how did you get into communications?
Um, yeah, it's kind of funny because I started my career in more purpose-led area. So I started in development, and I studied development in uni, and international development, and kind of
Mm,
ended up going over to Brussels, working in global health in the European Commission. And after that, I kind of ended up wanting to stay in Brussels, and I ended up staying there for another year, but I worked in a consultancy. And now it was a communications consultancy, but it was more political as well. And I suppose I kind of found a bit of interest in terms of kind of like taking really technical messages and communicating them back to audiences. And then I moved to London. I started working in a marketing communications agency called Engine. And then I moved to Ogilvy in London as well. So I was doing a lot of the purpose comms there, and we had a lot of UN clients at the time. So I managed to kind of find a niche for myself in that space. And of course, there was other work that you had to do on kind of more corporate communications. But if a purpose-led brief came in, I would kind of jump at it. And that was an area of expertise I was able to build up. So I think I got quite
mm,
lucky in the sense that quite early on, I was able to define a way that I could do a job that I kind of had maybe thought I was going to do, but in a big network agency, which was great. And I think it's always really useful if you're working in an agency to have a specialism as well, because people,
mm,
will go to you then, and
yeah.
clients will really respect you as well. So, and then I moved back to Ireland, and this job came up. So it kind of just all landed at the right time, because moved back, and I was on maternity leave, and I was thinking, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then this job came up, and I always
Wow.
wanted to go in house as well, because I think you can do a long stint in agency, and it's good to get in house and really understand a brand, and really understand what makes a brand tick.
Well, I was
I,
going to ask you that. What do you think are the big differences between working in an agency and working in house?
the stakeholder management, the
Oh,
internal stakeholder management, it is hugely time consuming, and your level of diplomacy skills. I never thought I would develop such a high level of diplomacy skills, and trying to broker decision making and
you
convince
mean in
people.
agencies?
No,
In house, yeah,
in
right.
house, because you do it in agency obviously when you're pitching and you're upselling
But
to a
someone else
client and
deals with
stuff.
that mostly.
Yeah, and you would sell it to the client, and then the client would sell it internally. But
Mm,
yeah, the internal stakeholder management is something I like. I think it it probably differs from company to company, but it's a very important part of being in house. And if you're not up for it, then I'd say stay in agency.
yeah, no, it's true. Agencies more compartmentalized. People have their roles. You've got account managers, account directors, and more project managers, and sort of buffer, act as a buffer. Really, that's what I found
Yeah,
in my agency days, anyway.
exactly. I used to just not like an agency the way things would just disappear. The client would take something, and then you'd never see the output again, and you'd never know like what happened with those
It's
slides that you
continuity, isn't it? It's
developed.
got a lack of
Yeah.
continuity in general.
And now I know when I'm on the other side that
Mm.
actually, the slides might have changed 100 times, and they might still be going through 100 rounds of approval, and you've probably forgotten about the agency. and the agency's part. So it's never a personal thing. It's just like people are moving at a very fast pace. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, what advice would you give to listeners at the beginning of their career, thinking about navigating their way through marketing and communications career? You've mentioned, pick a specialism. I think that's definitely can be a good tip. Anything else you've learned along the way?
I think build your network. I think that's really important. It's challenging when you move country, and I really noticed I have a great network in London, and I had to really work on it when I came over to Ireland. So I think
Mm.
building your network is really key, and maintaining the network as well. Because it's so interesting how people come back around, and you just see the same people. And I think that's a really important part of communications and marketing. I suppose just staying really on top of things. I think in an agency, it's amazing how much, you're just at the forefront of innovation. You're seeing different type of briefs coming in from brands, and you're just always kind of, you're seeing award-winning campaigns and things kind of coming past you. And when you move in house, maybe that doesn't happen as much, or you're stuck with other challenges, I suppose. So I think
Yeah.
definitely for a young person who is working in house as a marketeer, to try and really stay on top of, that innovation, and stay on top of looking at other brands, and then yeah, just maintaining kind of that hunger for interest, I suppose, and the curiosity is really important as a marketeer in communications.
I agree. I agree with all of that. Thank you. Um, well, look, I feel like I've learned so much, Sarah. That is an area I just not thought enough about, I think. So I really appreciate you giving us your time. Just tell people where they can find and connect with you online.
So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and if you want to hear more about what we're up to on sustainability, visit sr.primark.com.
We will do. Well, look, thanks again, Sarah. I hope to chat to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.